Yeah, that's you, Millie.
There's some seats in the front.
To you.
Good morning. Thank you for braving the fresh start today. It's certainly been a change in weather. It's not cold yet, that's true, but I've got a thermal on, so we're in trouble with winter hips. I'd like us all now to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today, the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm Lisa Hasty, the General Manager here at Albury Business Connect. I'd like to quickly introduce the team. We have Tanisha Smith here. Looks like she's got the DJ set up there behind the computer. Tanisha looks after all our events and administration. A lot of work goes behind the scenes to get these events up and running. So we're lucky to have Tanisha. Thank you. And up the back, Rhiannon Vanessa, if you didn't meet her on the way in, she was ticking off some names. Rhiannon looks after our communications. So socials, websites, our newsletter content, anything outbound. So thank you, Rhiannon. She loves an early start, so we appreciate you being here this morning. Welcome to our presenters from AlburyCity. We have Frank Zaknich, the CEO, Cameron Sloan, manager at RSM, and Adam DeMamiel up the back there, who's the co-founder and CEO of Voice of the Bush. Really looking forward to hearing about what you guys have been up to. From our board, we've got a couple of representatives. Our board is all volunteer and they do some great work supporting the operational team. So rather than me introduce them, they can talk for themselves. So we'll start over here.
I'm Alex, Deputy Chair. Welcome everybody. I think this is my 8th year, I think. Yeah, probably. Yeah, anyway, welcome everybody.
I'm Barry Young, Chair, Albury Business Connect and CBD. Yeah, probably the same time as you have. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Kate Stevens. I'm on the board at ABC. I'm in my 2nd year and I'm also one of the directors at PMG. So nice to see you all.
Thank you. And online we have Megan Gardner, who many of you will know from the Cure Hotel. So good morning, Meg's at home. I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors as well. And I think we have such a great supportive business community. And to have this many sponsors after the last couple of years is a real testament to those businesses wanting to support you. So there's quite a crowd of them here today. So we're going to start with Clayton, if you'd like to introduce yourself and let us know where you're from.
Tony Wood from Business Edge Advisors, and yeah, Stephen Albury, seamless, few businesses. Been sponsored for a couple of years, it's good.
Kate.
Oh, hi. I'm from PRT. And I also have my directing periods matched up as well. So yeah, live both lives. ABC and PRD, we only go by 3-lettered names.
So we have a couple of representatives from HIB. If you want to just give yourselves a little shout out there.
Yeah, Matt Sherrod, here with David and Nick. There's another 3-letter organisation.
Perfect. Is there any other sponsors that I've missed in the room? Here we go.
Yeah, I'm Kelly Barr from Charter Patrons. We've got a word with our 3 letters. Yeah, HR consulting.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, RSM, but I'm going to talk about later.
And RSM, another 3-letter. So thanks for that. So we'll be able to look out next year for any other 3-letter businesses and we'll approach your sponsorship.
Albury City Council, ACC.
Yeah.
ACC, thank you. Just on ACC, I'd like to welcome Councillor Alice Blacken. If you haven't met Alice, then I encourage you to do so. She makes herself available at these forums and also business after hours, and she'd like to know everyone in the room. So if you haven't had an opportunity to introduce yourself, then please go and see Alice after today's session or find her at one of our other events. What else do I need to tick off here? I think, of course, we need to welcome any new members and new faces today. Thank you for coming along. And the rest of the crew that are online, there's probably 150 or something. So Good morning. I'd like to now hand over to Frank, who's going to give us some details on the proposed budget for 22-23. Thanks, Frank.
Just so I don't.
Yeah.
So-
Just in a little square there, if we can.
Oh,
hear you.
That's right, I should have turned up earlier for the induction. Okay, thanks everyone, and good to be back at your place to talk about the draft budget for the coming year from Albury City. It's been a rough couple of years, and the resilience of this community in particular has been outstanding, really, in terms of the way recovery is starting to pick up. We haven't sort of hit that peak just yet, but it's certainly really positive signs of growth and recovery, and that's great to see. And we see that in our events and programs as people are gaining confidence again to go out and about. And Anzac Day is a great, great indicator of that. So thank you. Okay. As I said, we're here to talk about the draft delivery program and the annual budget that's coming up. Let's start again by acknowledging country and paying respects to Wiradjuri elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the culture, traditions, hopes and aspirations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community, and acknowledge any other First Nations people in the room. This is a diagram by local artist Tanisha McGuinness, reflects elders of the community at the centre and us walking together on our reconciliation journey. And interesting note there is the kangaroo tracks where kangaroos can only move forward, not backwards. So as a community moving forward together. So it's really symbolic of the reconciliation plan that's underway. So really important to understand who we are as a community when we're planning for the community. So we've gained around 1,000 people since last time we talked. So over 55,000 people now. Quite a young community still, reflected with the members in the room here. Less than 40 usually in this demographic. So quite a young community compared to a lot of regional and rural communities who have their population much older. Lots of houses and cars, as you can see, and the way we live as a community is changing. So families, couples with kids, about a third of our people are lone person households. So that tells us something in terms of a range of things, housing, how people live and need to be supported across the community, and what we can do as business and council and community to support that. Single parent households and group households make up the remainder. So what's the business we're in? We're building a nationally significant regional city that is vibrant, diverse, innovative, connected, inspired by its location, its culture. You all know that, but it's great to tell people that that's what we're doing. You're doing it in the business that you operate. How is that connected to the bigger picture for Albury and Albury predominant? Council's role in that is to partner with organisations like yourselves to make that happen. So state government, local business, community, volunteer groups, individuals, to make that happen. So the community strategic plan is the broader plan. The council plan focus is what I'm talking about today. So we've got 4 pillars, as most organisations have, in support of how do we deliver on our values. So our community's told us loud and clear again more recently through the 2050 consultations. 4 key pillars still: a growing sustainable economy, an enhanced natural environment, a caring community, how do we look after each other and look out for each other, and then a leading community, how do we grow leadership, how do we get a plan for succession. So a big budget this year again, as it usually is, significant expenditure, $165 million there, including around $57 in capital work. So that's maintaining and renewing our infrastructure across the city. So I'll just step you through quickly the components of that. When we're developing Albury 2050, our community said clearly again, we want an integrated and connected transport system. That's a big issue for the city, just people getting around and connecting. So a lot of the work we're doing, you'll be aware, we're rolling out consultation at the moment around the MOVE, the integrated transport strategy for Albury-Wodonga, to address that, to take care of those issues, to understand them and do something about them. In the meantime, in respect to Albury, we've got a range of projects there that we're undertaking, from roads, drainage, footpaths, connecting the community in that way. And some of those investments are there on the screen. Clean and efficient water supply is critical for a growing city as well. So water and wastewater treatment are critical for large cities of this size. So again, significant investment in maintaining and renewing existing infrastructure. So it's important to maintain what we've got, absolutely, even though we are building new infrastructure in that growth corridor through the Warringah. A big focus in the latter part of the last council term, and fairly squarely this council's term, around the impact of climate adaptation and how we can minimise our carbon footprint across the city. So initiatives through how we manage waste, more effective reuse and recycling, and that circular economy focus that is both an environmental advantage but also a business opportunity from a circular economy perspective, which has seen significant investment in that in the city in recent times. Again, we touch on the changing climate, so work around managing our stormwater more effectively, if that's even possible, based on major storms that we've had here, and nothing has been experienced in the north of the state, but that's an important area we need to focus on in terms of stormwater drainage, how we manage and reuse and recycle stormwater in the city. Arts and culture, entertainment, cultural experiences, sport, they're all a focus for the city again, and significant work's happening in our cultural precinct planning, also along the Riverside precinct that we might have seen in your regular walks in that corridor, and extending those throughout the city, out through the Goona in the Lavington area, works to upgrade parks and facilities to a standard that our community expect. Showcasing the city around arts and culture again, work on our historic buildings to provide artisans and artist spaces down at the pump house, Riverside Precinct Public Art Works and the like. Financial assistance is significant again, not just to community groups through loans, interest-free loans, direct grants to community arts, sporting and cultural groups, but we're also, as the council, moving to operate MAMA, the Murray Art Museum Albury, as a standalone entity at arm's length to greater encourage the philanthropic effort and input in that facility in the city. And a leading community focus as well. How do we lead? How do we develop leaders? Council's been partnering with a number of organisations, including CSU, to develop the community leadership program, but also through human resource management, our EV fleet program replacement, the Gira Trail, of course, and strategic land and other acquisitions that are proposed. Significant investment in the Albury-Wodonga regional deal, still a discussion that's ongoing. Some of the partners have aligned, some are still thinking about it through the Victorian government system, but we have been able to achieve, just in the last few months, an $80 million investment so far from the federal government, which is a positive thing in that respect, and we look forward to developing that plan over that 10-year window. Health is a critical focus area for that, of course, and there'll be more about that in the near future. So some of the work that's related to that funding includes the Albury Entertainment Centre redevelopment to attract a greater level of events and conferences. Important that people know where to go when they're in Albury, so our public toilet strategy is a key part of that as well, having good level facilities, emergency management as a focus, and upgrades to our ageing infrastructure. Okay, so all this just doesn't happen magically without a contribution from our community, a financial contribution. So this year we're looking at about a 98 cent per week increase in the average residential rate per property. That includes the rate fee increase, a $20 increase to the domestic waste management charge that has been not increased for some time, and also no increases to water or sewer charges again this year. And for business properties, the average business rate increase will be around 2.3%. So again, contributions at a level based around the rate peg set by the New South Wales government. So where does that money come from? You might think that rates pays for everything. They don't. Rates are about half of our income. The rest comes from user charges and fees, so the entry fees to facilities like the AEC, parking at the airport, for example, where people use facilities and pay for the use of that facility. And then the rest comes from grants and contributions from state and federal government, and some interest on investments, of course. So this graphic sort of indicates for every $100 of rates that's received, where do we spend that across the broad spectrum of services to property and people that the council delivers. So big ticket items are, of course, the roads and infrastructure. So that's roads, water and sewer, community and recreation, all our sporting fields, parks and gardens and the like. Environment and sustainability, around $13. It's our waste management, our environmental programs, city planning, community consultation, arts, culture and library all feature there in that allocation. And again, we also utilise loan funds or borrowings from the state government to fund some of these major projects. So this year we're looking to borrow around $22 million to deliver on some of those significant initiatives. Our debt is very manageable. We're running at around 7% of debt ratio, which is well below the 20% the state government sets each year. And no new loans for our sewer and water fund that are performing quite well with their reserves. Stay accountable, report back to our community quarterly to our council group on a quarterly budget review basis. We do a regular newsletter. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. That'll tell you about all our major projects and how we're tracking within the year. So we're in that have a say period now. We're doing this similar sort of presentations across the city to community and business service clubs and the like. So participate in that. We have a say website. Give us your comments. This is a high level sort of overview. We go right into the detail in terms of the list of roads we're going to reconstruct or reseal this year. They're all listed, mapped on a map of the city, so you can go to them and understand what that project is, what the estimated value is, etc. What other programs are in place. So do that and encourage others to do so. And I'm happy to take any questions now as we wrap up. Thank you.
On one comment, the recycling centre, it's really one of the cutting edge recycling centres in Australia. Am I reading it right?
That's right, yeah, and it's internationally recognised as well. So, and what it generates is significant activity and innovation around the circular economy. So you saw recently the fly larvae and processing packaging food waste with the robotics pulling apart the plastic and using soldier ant or fly larvae, I think it is, to process it. Anyway, it's very innovative, very cool. So that's a pilot program that because of our reputation, we got the call to say, look, you want to try this out and support us in doing it. So that's the positive thing. And then the other end of the scale is the plastics, PET recycling, circular plastics, significant investment. That's one of the biggest reprocessing facilities in Australia. They're processing 9 billion bottles, annually. So it's a significant reprocessing and re-establishment facility. Generates significant employment as well, and cutting edge technology, which is putting us right at the forefront. So circular economy is a big one for this community, a big potential, and already keeping some goals there on that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Frank?
Otherwise, grab us at the end of the session.
Thanks, Frank. It's great to get an update and see what's going on. If you haven't done a tour out at the Waste Management Centre, please go and do it. It's really fascinating. I went out only a few weeks ago and was just so impressed by it all, and also was there for the launch of the, I call it the maggot processing centre. So you were much better at saying what that was all about.
Sounds more technical.
That's right. I'd like to now invite Cameron up all the way into the talking square.
Thanks, Lisa.
Cam's going to talk to us about tax planning and life after COVID.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks for coming along. It's a lot colder these days, and I'm sure you saw the lineup of the Albury Council budget and the accountants talk about tax planning, and you'll storm through and go up early. So thanks for coming along. All this information is just general advice, so nothing specific. If you've got any questions, obviously speak to an advisor. So RSM, just a little bit about RSM. 1922, so bit of a big year, big birthday. So we're celebrating our 100-year anniversary this year. So the Albury office had a bit of a bash last week and invited some clients along and had the chairman around. But it's really exciting to sort of see the growth and see some of the history. So started over in Perth and Bunbury. That's where I'm originally from, and Albury 25 years ago, and we've just started a Gosford office. So it's really cool to see RSM have a really big regional presence as a mid-tier accounting firm, and it's something that we're really proud of as well. So, just skip that one. So yeah, some of the things I'm going to go through is just some tax and then financial year planning strategies, some of the recent budget initiatives. I think, Frank, your budget was much more exciting than Scott Morrison's budget. So there's not too much to go through there, but there's some things that might be worth considering that might have been glossed over, and just some things that as we move out of COVID-19 as businesses that we need to consider. I mean, it's a lot of topics in terms of interest rises and inflation. So I'll run through those. So I won't go into too much depth and detail with a lot of them. There's some that I really want to highlight that I think might be worth just taking home. Some key aspects and some things before 30th of June, because we've got a cut-off date. Some things that we have to do before 30th of June that we can't do afterwards and potentially save some tax on. So superannuation contributions, that's a really popular one. That's when you put money into super and you can claim it as a tax deduction. So that's a lot of what people consider if they've got some spare money and they've got a bit of a tax problem, they like to put money into super. Temporary full expensing, capital asset purchases. So that's a lot about buying a plant equipment, buying a laser cutter, or it could be just a vehicle, and claiming that as an immediate deduction. So those rules were brought in a couple of years ago, and they're looking to expire. So the end date for that is 2023, and I doubt either government might push that through. So that's just my guess. I'm not a betting man, but that might end up soon. So it's worth thinking about that, not just for this year, but also for next year as well. And the implications of that with the loss carryback tax offset. So that's related to companies, and I'll go through in a little bit more detail a bit later on that. Some things to consider as well as additional expenditure, so potentially prepaying costs in advance. So if it's been a really good year, some people like to go, well, I'm going to get in before the interest rate rises and prepay some interest right now. Not only does that help, manage your costs, you're going to get a tax deduction for that as well. So you can prepay costs a year in advance. Paying bonuses to staff, that's my favourite tax deduction. I tell that to my boss, they don't really pay attention. Or even just paying out of leave. So annual leave balances have really grown during COVID. So if there's a situation where you can, within the guidelines, it's worth considering if an employee would like to take that on as well. It's tax deductible. Reviewing debtors for any bad debts, that's always tax deductible as well. It's always good to go through your debtors list. And reviewing stock on hand. So generally, small businesses don't really review their stock on hand too much if you have stock on hand. You can get a tax deduction if your stock on hand it's not generally a tax deduction, but you can get a tax benefit from having stock which is valued lower at the end of the year compared to the start of the year. So one thing to consider in relation to that is, well, maybe there is less stock on hand this year. We've had some supply chain disruptions, less stock may be available. So it's worth considering what that might be if there is any potential for that to have a benefit for you. So just some simple things to consider before the end of June. Some of the budget initiatives, like I said, it wasn't too exciting. Probably one of the best things that happened was ensuring that the COVID-19 business grants for non-assessable, non-exempt income. So that was all the state grants, so the New South Wales JobSaver the Victorian Business Support Fund, a lot of the hospitality grants, they were essentially made non-assessable, non-exempt income. That's the technical term for you don't have to pay tax on it. So we don't have to worry about that. That's a big relief. The 20% deduction on cost to upskill staff. So what the government has noticed, and and you guys would notice it as well, is there's a big skills gap shortage in the market. And the government's trying to drive more investment from businesses to bring that through. So essentially what they're saying is if you go through an external provider to train your staff, for every dollar that you spend, you'll get $1.20 as a tax deduction. So they're trying to boost what you can get back based on the money you spend there. So that's something that's worth considering as we move through. That's not generally pre-30 June. That's something that they're looking to bring through in the future. And obviously the election, when do we have to vote? 21st of May. That might not change things there, but that's something that both governments are really keen to invest in, something worth noticing. RAT tests were made to be tax deductible for businesses. So a lot of hospitality businesses and a lot of people support RAT tests for people to test so they can have staff there. So that was made to be tax deductible for businesses as well as individuals. So it's worth, if you did purchase that, they just gave some clarity to people there. And superannuation. So this is for the retirees. Alex, I won't point at you, but you're obviously looking at that in the future. You have to take a minimum pension drawdown. Well, they're not really maxing that out yet. They're going, look, we understand it's a bit of a tough time. You don't have to draw it out as much as usual. So they're going to ramp that up in the future years. So there's a bit of relief for retirees or people planning retirees, Alex. So yeah, a bit more detail on superannuation. So I talk about putting money into super as a tax deduction. Generally, you're only allowed to put about $27,500 this year as an additional tax deduction. So that's capped each year. And it used to be a use it or lose it system. So you used to be able to put $27,500 in, but if you only put $10,000 in, then next year you can't catch that up. Well, what they've changed is that you've got a 5-year period where you can actually look back and go, well, I didn't make all my caps, I didn't make all my contributions that I could have back in 2019, and I would like to do that. So what that means is that if you've got particularly high income for this year, it could be for any reason, it could be a large capital gain, you might have sold, Glenroy house prices doubled, you might have a big capital gain on that for whatever reason. There might be a particular situation where you go, well, I'm going to pay more tax than normal, and it might be worth being able to utilise this concession. So some eligibility, you need to have a balance of less than $500,000 in their previous financial year. So that's something worth considering. And I'll go through a bit of a case study just to make sure that this sort of sinks in or you can sort of make sense. So I've gone through, so Pascal, used a bit of a grim example. His mother died and he got an investment property from her, his inheritance. He sold that and he got a tidy capital gain. So what's happened is his boss, he's just on an annual wage. He works, let's say he works for RSM. He gets $7.5 grand put into super each year as a superannuation guarantee contribution. That's what your boss puts in. That's employer contributions. That's part of the cap. So your cap back in 2019 was 25 grand. So didn't use 17.5 grand. Back in the day, you wouldn't have been able to go back and use that additional contribution. Where over time, you go put 8,000 in, there's an unused amount, that grows. So you've got a 5-year period where this unused cap grows. If you've got a 90 grand salary and you've got $105,000 additional income, well, you're paying an extra 42 grand in tax. So it's great to have that Glenroy investment property and capital gain income, but you're paying a lot of tax on it. One thing Pascal can do is go, well, I might, build for my retirement and plan for the future, as well as save a little bit of tax. So he can actually put an additional $69,500 based on this unused cap and save $28,000 in personal tax. And that additional tax just goes to 14 grand. So it's a good way of saving tax as well as building for the future. So it's something worth considering. Obviously, there's impacts in relation to that. So if you're Pascal and you're 25, then you can't access that money until you're 65. So it's discussing this with a financial planner. I can't give financial advice. I can't give superannuation contribution advice. It's just the tax impact. And if your income is above $250,000 and you reduce it above that, there might be a little bit of a top-up tax. So the government doesn't like people saving too much tax, so there's always ways to patch it back up. It's something to be aware of. Tax depreciation, I'll go through this relatively briefly. So I said essentially all the additional deductions that we're able to claim as a business for purchasing a vehicle or plant and equipment will end by 2023. What those additional deductions were was pretty much if you buy an asset, if it was an $850,000 tractor or header, whether it's a $50,000 vehicle, there was no limit. You could claim it as a tax deduction if it was plant equipment. Now that will end by the end of 2023. But one thing that people sometimes don't think about is that it's not an additional deduction. We're always going to get that tax deduction. We're getting that tax deduction now. So it helps in years where we have a large tax liability for businesses. We can purchase that and we save a lot of tax in that year. What that means is in 2 years' time, we might have another situation where we have a fantastic year and have some good profit, but we won't have that depreciation that we always had. So that means that there's some things to plan in the future. So it's good to plan right now, but it's worth thinking about what your capital expansion projects really look like in the next few years and what you really need on hand. For motor vehicles, you can't just buy 150 grand, Rolls Royce or Lexus and claim as a tax deduction. It's capped at 60,733 for 2022 year. And one thing that's just interesting about is, and this is just some of the stuff we can look at. So if you're a small business and your turnover is less than 10 mil, you can essentially claim everything. And this is from 2020 and this ends in 2023. So at the end of 2023, unless the government at the time announced in their budget, essentially that unlimited cap of what we can claim goes down to about $1,000. So I don't think we'll ever go back down that far, but I don't think they'll be as generous as they are at the moment. So it's worth planning now, especially with the supply chain issues. So I'll move through. So the loss carryback tax offset, what used to happen is if you have a company, and this is only available for companies, and you made a loss, you can only carry that forward. So what used to happen is if you have lots of deductions or a particular year where you made a loss, you were pretty much banking on if you made profits in the future, you wouldn't have to necessarily pay tax and use that losses moving forward. Now, what they've done is gone, well, if you pay tax in 2021 and in 2022 you buy heaps of equipment, you can claim all these deductions like we spoke about with the depreciation rules, so much so that you've accidentally got a loss. Well, you can actually go back and look and go, well, I can go back, look at my previous tax return I paid tax on, and look to claim some of the tax that you've paid in the past back. So instead of carrying it forward, you can actually utilise some of the losses now. So even though we go, cool, it's great, I paid tax last year, Cam, and I missed out on that depreciation benefit, we could still actually access some of that depreciation benefit. So it's a little bit complex. It's worth talking to your advisor about. But if you're in a company structure and you've paid some tax in the past and you know that you've got a lot of deductions this year, it's worth considering and seeing what options you have available. And you can either get a cash refund if you've got a current tax liability for that position, you can reduce that as well. I'll skip over that. And yeah, that's all the fun tax stuff. I'm sure everyone's excited to hear about those things and hopefully come away from some stuff and a little bit more, I guess, expansive as we move forward through COVID, and there's some challenges at the moment, anxiety around inflation, interest rates personally, all those sorts of things. So businesses, the costs are going up. So obviously cost of living is going up for individuals, but also for businesses. And sometimes what happens is us as business people, we sort of get caught up in not changing our prices too much and not reviewing those costs and prices as much. And that really eats into margins. So if you don't change your prices, whether it be service, whether it be goods, and that isn't passed on, well, your bottom line is reducing. So it's important to review costs a lot more regularly now because everything's changing a lot quicker now. Costs are going up a lot higher. I think it's the highest inflation we've had since GST. So it's a really interesting time for businesses and individuals. So you don't want to be, the last thing you want to be doing is working the same amount or even more and you're not getting a return for it. So being comfortable valuing your output and adjusting prices according to the margin that you want as a business is really important. So that's one thing that moving forward in this environment we should look towards, as well as leave balances. So border controls have been popular. Oh, well, they haven't been popular. I'm talking to the wrong room here. border controls have been what they are, but people can't go on holidays unless you want to go on a holiday in, like, I don't know, do people go to holiday in Gundagai? I don't know. But people haven't done it, maybe because Gundagai is an option. But 23 million days, additional leave days since the start of COVID, which is pretty incredible, really. And the impact of that is businesses will have this contingent liability. They've got this larger amount that, well, they've got long-term employees and they've got this annual leave balance that they're entitled to. So if they leave, well, that will have to be potentially paid out. So does the cash flow actually manage you be able to pay that out? If you're looking to sell the business, well, what's the business worth? We have to take into account the reduction of, you know, the staff liabilities that are on those employees. So it's worth thinking about, especially in a tough labour market. Well, what is your leave balance? What would happen if someone left? What happens if you do want to sell in a couple of years? And worth thinking about those things. And there's some strategies in relation to managing that. And I think flexible work's a key thing that people and businesses are discussing at the moment. So it could be encouraging people to take an extra day off and working a 4-day week and taking the Friday off as annual leave. Not only does that, you know, you still pay the normal wage, that still works through, but you're able to reduce your liability as well. It could be being a bit more flexible in terms of, let's take a Monday or Friday off a month. And it could be, like I discussed before, paying out annual leave. So generally you can only pay out annual leave when they've got in excess of 4 weeks, and if the employee obviously chooses. So you can't force that on anyone, but it's something that an employee might go, look, I don't want to go on holidays, just want this cashed out. There might be a reason for it. Not only is it a tax deduction, not only does it reduce your leave liability, but the employee is happy about that as well. So obviously it'd be worth considering the cash flow impact on any leave payouts as well. But it's worth considering what actually is the liability for your employees, especially long-term employees as well, because long service leave kicks in at 10 years. And creating a strategy to go, well, what are some of the risks that I have as this goes forward? So, and yeah, this is something that'll be a good example. RSM obviously had a fantastic DeMamiel article about flexible work and some of the changes that we've had to adapt and make in the market, and just sort of accounting for better accommodate and reflect employees' lives. And RSM were nominated for the Business New South Wales Employer of Choice, and some of the changes that we've had to make sort of revolve around encouraging that work-life balance. And some of it has been a little bit of that, encouraging annual leave or changing of days or changing of hours and suiting around employees' lives. And I think as we move forward in this sort of COVID-19 environment, I mean, even a simple situation where I was able to visit back home in Albury for the last 2 years, or I was able to extend my trip and just work remotely from there, where I wouldn't have even considered that 3 years ago. So different things that we're sort of used to now, and we can encourage, and that could actually benefit our business and increase employee retention in a tough labour market as well. So, yeah, those are some of the key things I wanted to discuss with you today. Appreciate it's cold and it's not the funnest topic, but yeah, any questions, Phil?
Well done.
Thanks. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Very well done.
Tax planning and employee retention strategies, so thank you. All these slides will be sent out after today's session, so if there's some information on there that you weren't able to capture with a photo or something, we'll get that out to you. We're really pleased this year to implement the community hot seat, we call it, where we've invited a community business or a not-for-profit to come and share a little bit about what they do. We've been pleased to have Border Trust last month, Glenys. And prior to that, we had the Ivor Memorial Trust. And today, it's Adam from Boys to the Bush. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks for having me along, guys. And I just wanted to introduce you to Jackie and Sarah up the back, who are part of our team at Boys to the Bush now. I did one of these, I think, maybe 4.5, 5 years ago, when it was kind of just in its infancy. And today is more about giving you an update. I'm sure there's some of you that haven't got a clue who we are, so I'll give you a really quick snapshot on who we are and what we do. But we're a little charity that was born here in Albury 5 years ago. Myself and a couple of mates I toured with had this idea of running some camps for some some lads. And, you know, my background's in teaching, but more so in behaviour management. And yeah, so we had this idea, we'd run a few camps and sort of see what had happened, and we'd do it in our spare time. And then 3 years ago, our board sort of said, we can keep sort of chipping away and helping 50, 60 kids a year, or one of you need to bite the bullet and do it full time. And thankfully, the other couple of co-founders pushed me forward, and I was really keen to do that. And it's kind of evolved into something a bit bigger and something we hadn't planned on it becoming. Today there's a lot more strategy and around what we're doing and where we're going, but at the end of the day, we're not in the business of making money, we're in the business of helping kids and changing lives, and we're certainly getting some amazing outcomes in each of the locations we're now situated. But the questions are always asked around, you know, why boys, why not girls, and that sort of thing, and these sort of statistics everyone knows, but the demographic we're drawing from generally are kids that have high levels of trauma and significant trauma beyond what most of you could probably imagine. And they're kids that are in out-of-home care, they're kids that have some really, their future's pretty bleak for them. So we're really proud now that, you know, some of those kids that have come through our programs are in full-time employment, they're back at school, they're back with family, they're not going to jail. We've got a couple of them now working full-time for us. So some of those outcomes have been truly amazing and something we're really proud of. In terms of our growth, I'm mindful I've got not much time, lots to talk about. COVID's been really good to us as an organisation in that it helped us. You know, most other charities in this space rely heavily on sponsorship and fundraising. We've sort of flipped that on its head, given the last couple of years that wasn't really an option for us, and we didn't want to be going around tapping businesses on the shoulder to support us when everyone was doing it pretty tough. So we generate the majority of the funds through, it's a fee for service. So a lot of the kids we support are in out-of-home care or are homeless or have NDIS packages. So we are receiving government funds indirectly. It's from the government, but on an individual basis. This year, we will be tapping people on the shoulder for sponsorship, and we will be doing some fundraising, which Jackie's doing a lot of our community partnerships and running our black tie gala evening we're having in a month or so. I think it's coming around pretty quick. But 18 months ago, there was myself and I think 3, maybe 4 others full-time. Today, there's about 35 full-time and 45 casuals sort of on the weekly rosters, where we have our headquarters here in Albury. We have an office and staff in Forbes and in Bathurst. We're just setting up in Wangaratta, and we'll be in Leeton and Young by the end of the year. I've just got to wait for a minister to make an announcement in a couple of weeks, but that'll be kicking off next year. And then, this year, and then next year there'll be another 2 locations on top of that. So, you know, we didn't set about trying to build an empire or anything like that. All that means is we're reaching more kids. Our target's to be in front of 130,000 kids by 2030. And I think we're going to smash that number. Of that number, we're not going to change all their lives. We'll have a positive impact, and we'll give a good experience for a lot of those kids. Of that number, it'll be around 20 to 25% of those kids will be involved in programs that really change their lives and save their lives. We've got a number of kids that would be they wouldn't be with us if they didn't have someone in their community that they could call late at night. And some of our staff, I'm so proud of the staff we've been able to bring together, but it's not a 9-to-5 job for those guys. It's you help the kids when they need the help, and unfortunately that's outside of business hours generally. But some of these kids have been lucky to have someone to make that call, or someone's called them worried about the kid and have been able to get around there in time and resuscitate kids or rip them down from nooses around it. Really traumatic, terrible stuff. But the unfortunate thing is the demand is so high and it's in, like, I love Albury, I call Albury home. I've only been here, I don't know, 17 years or something, but I've lived in a few other communities that are really beautiful places. And I was lucky that I was introduced to good people in those communities, but what you see in this is each of our, all of these communities, and it's all communities just have these kids that have absolutely horrific backgrounds and stuff that happens at home shouldn't, and they're not engaged with anyone, and that's what we do. We engage with the kids really simply, and then we use that engagement to introduce them to all of you guys, all the good people in the community that can support them and become a conduit for the community to support the kids. So it's great. Some people, what they can do to help us is donate money, which is always good, but for others, that's not something they can sort of do. But other people open the gates and let us bring kids out to their farm. They let us bring kids into your business to see what your business does. But it's all aimed around giving more opportunities to put these kids in front of some good people from their community, because they are so far disconnected from their community. I could ramble on, but I might just any questions is probably the easiest way to go.
Adam, do you want to tell the people in the room what one of the camp experiences looks like?
Yeah, so we've got a whole heap of programs now. 2 years ago, camps is what we do. Camps are probably 10% of what we do now. But on the camps, it's just about getting them out off their devices, and they're pretty bloody boring camps, to be honest. We get them out, it's not high adventure and abseiling, it's just they get out and do a bit of work on some farms and help some people, and then if they're playing up, they have a pretty ordinary time. If they're doing the right thing, then we reward them and do some fun stuff. But it's more about having blokes and women, just good people with them, and that's what they're craving, these kids. We've offered some really brilliant, fancy experiences in the city doing things, and the kids, all they want is to be sitting on the riverbank having a yarn to someone. They want your time, and like our programs have sort of reiterated that to me, is that there's loads of money put into these kids, government money. Some of these kids have budgets of, $600,000-700,000 a year on them. And a lot of it's just wasted on putting them in motels, playing Xbox, and then sending them to, movie and stuff in the holidays. And it's not what they want. They want people that give a crap about them, with them, that they can lean on. So that's, our camps are really big. I probably haven't sold it very well. But they are, it's the same as if I took my kids camping on the weekend. If they were being little pests and brats, then they wouldn't have a great time. If they're being good and chipping in, then they get rewarded. What we do most now is mentoring, one-on-one mentoring. So the majority of our staff each day will work with one kid, and they'll get that kid. They do a bit in the community. They'll go out to some farms. I'll do some recreational stuff. They might have kayaking or fishing. But it's all about it's about the journey, I guess. If they're heading out to a farm, it's the yarn they have in the youth on the way out there, and then it's not so much what they learn with the farmer, but it's actually meeting the farmer and having a conversation with the farmer during the day. So we do run school programs now. We're running some gala days in Albury and Wodonga, where we've got 600 kids booked in at each, and that's open to any sort of kids. All our programs are open to any kids, to be honest, but who tends to come up are the most vulnerable. So yeah, there's a few other programs in the pipeline at the moment. We've run a couple of girls' camps, but we're mindful of what we do well, and that's working with boys. So we'll sort of stay in our lane there and get chipped on.
Huge credit to you, because I did have a look on the website the other day, and I just realised how much you would actually now filter the program.
Probably need to
into
fix up
other
some stuff
local-
on the website.
But how much you actually roll in, it's a huge credit to you and the original founders.
Yeah, thank you.
About how it's grown and how you've now filtered that into other communities, not just Albury. So well done.
Yeah, and we'll go to wherever. Like, the demand is in every community. So it's about the seed funding to get us in the community. So state government will put us in Leeton and Young this year. A philanthropic organisation is putting us in Wang and a couple of Victorian communities, but then it's up to the community to chip in to keep us there. Like, we generate most of the funds to keep it going, but you know, it's the buy-in from the community, letting us come to your businesses. It's supporting events that we run, things like that keep us there. So we have a community information nights in a couple of other communities that weren't that well received, and we're like, oh, bugger it, we'll go somewhere else. Like, it's not going to work without the community wanting us there. So I will say one really good thing that we're doing is, and you might see them start popping up around town, is we have our little sign that we're putting in shop front windows of businesses that support us, and it's just, you know, proud of supporting Voice to the Bush or something. So if you're the bakery that donates some bread for our barbecues, you might put one in your shop front window, and it's not for advertising. We don't need to advertise, but for kids that are so far disconnected from their community, they wear our uniform with pride, and that's the only team or family that they belong to. They're really proud of that. So for them to suddenly see it popping up in shop front windows, I think it's really powerful. It's showing them, you know, how many people in their community really are on the same team as them. So, and the other thing I'll say is none of those shops get broken into. So, yeah, that's driving along.
Thanks, Adam. Adam, I think I certainly learned a lot more of the detail that you work in, and I think we're really lucky to have you doing that in our community. So thanks for coming along. Adam mentioned their gala night. I think it's next month. Is there still some tickets available? So if you want to get in, that's another way to support. That's obviously a fundraising effort. So thank you. Tanisha's going to jump up now. Just let us know what events are coming up, and then you'll all be able to have a chat or scuttle off to work.
I'll make it really fast so you guys can head off if you need to. Just want to give a run over of the next 2 events we have coming up in May. It's a bit of a quiet month compared to March and April that we just had. First one is Young Business Edge. Their next event is the 23rd of May, called Monday Movie Nights. It's a great opportunity for your team to go there and network. And if you do buy tickets and you are an Albury CBD, not Albury CBD, Albury Business Connection member, you do get the membership rates, and so does your team. So make sure you head on, allow your team to have a good night out. The next one is, of course, the Business After Hours on the 25th of May. Yes, it's hosted by Squad Recruitment. They're hitting their 40 years in business, and they're having it at Church Street Hotel. So make sure you come along to that and help them celebrate.
Thanks, Tanisha. Cameron and Adam, if you've got any suggestions on topics or things you'd like to see at a business before our session, then get in touch with me or one of the team, and thank you for coming.
How you going?